Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing one of the oldest and most famous film brands. More famous often for their cameras than their films, but they do have films. It's Rollei, and we'll be diving into their wonderful RPX 400 emulsion. Whether you are new to film photography or a long-time analog enthusiast, our channel covers all things film, from tips and tricks, film reviews to how-to videos. Subscribe now and keep those notifications turned on so that you never miss a beat. Happy shooting! So I said that we'd be talking about one of the oldest and best known film brands, and actually I'm going to start with a little bit of a story. Now, there's some debate about whether this is a true story or whether it's a myth. I enjoy it so much, we're going to discuss it regardless, and then we can all decide how true to history it probably was. So, Rollei. Although it's never as big as Kodak, as Zeiss, maybe doesn't have the same brand recognition as Leica, it is still an amazing, amazing brand, well known for its cameras, particularly its TLRs, and that is where our storytelling begins. One of the founders of Rollei is Reinhold Heidecker, and he was making cameras with Voigtlander when World War I broke out. He went into the trenches, as many did, and he observed, or possibly participated in, the surveillance from the trenches where you have a periscope that looks up and out so you can see what's going on without sticking your head up and it's danger. And that provoked a thought of what if you could create a camera that could do that would be able to see in a certain way, that would separate you or the image taking material, i.e. the film playing, from the viewpoint, and through a slightly convoluted thought process came up with the idea of a TLR. Now the legend goes that he went back to Voigtlander after the war and pitched this idea, and Voigtlander turned him down, said no, we already make loads of cameras, they're brilliant, move on. So he left, he formed the Rollei company and produced Rollei TLRs that of course were then adopted back by many other camera manufacturers. But Rollei Flexes and then probably Yashica mats are probably the most famous of the TLR range. Of course, Rollei went on to create other ones. There are some beautiful Rollei point and shoots from the 70s that are really, really gorgeous, similar to Trips in many ways, Olympus Trips. But there we are. So that's the start of the story for Rollei. They began with these TLR cameras. Allegedly, they then moved into other cameras and also eventually into films. We've shown a couple of different Rollei films before in the Wonder Box. RPX 400 is a gorgeous emulsion, 35mm and 120. It can be pushed up to 1600 pretty well. It dries very flat, which is a wonderful thing for home developers and home scanners. Oh, and actually there's one other part of the story that I'm not sure if it's true, but again, the internet tells us, so we will repeat it. But legend goes that Wilhelmina Heidecker, Reinhold's wife, was the one who had the idea for 35mm cameras. We do know that most cameras around World War I time were roll film. It was much easier to produce. It was much easier to set up a camera that can just pull film from one side to the other. 35mm is brilliantly convenient, but you need, sprockets. You need film counters inside the camera. You need a lot of extra bits and pieces that maybe make it more complicated to manufacture. Ultimately, a roll camera needs a shutter and two spools and then you're off. But it is obviously more compact, and it came with other conveniences like the ability to roll back into the canister to protect it before sending it off to the lab. It wasn't about to unravel in the bag. It wasn't about to do a lot of those things that cause issues with roll film. So I don't know whether it was Wilhelmina wishing a smaller camera for her own little hands, or whether it was just a wider industry going on. But the Rollei baby cameras, Baby Flex I think they were called, were a very popular range of 35mm that then carried on through the decades. Anyway, back to the emulsion. So people compare it with HP5 and T-Max, but say that it is slightly flatter in contrast to both of those. So you will get brilliant greys, but you might not get the really dark blacks, you might not get the really bright whites that you would enjoy for a well-rounded photo. Of course, that's straight out of the camera, so to speak, straight out of the developing tank. You can play with those in making prints, you can play them in post on a computer, but at least you know you'll get a very flat image out of it. ISO 400, so very flexible. As I've mentioned earlier, it can be pushed up to 1600 pretty reliably. There's a little box to tick on the canister itself if you're going to do that, to let your lab know. Otherwise, really good film, lovely emulsion, wonderful historic brand, and an absolute cracker to shoot. So for me, we had talked about the Delta 3200 as being my indoor evening film with my SLR camera. This is going to be in my carry around day-to-day point and shoot, my LCA maybe, or my Olympus trip, for the hours of daylight that we have in the middle of those wintry days, because I think photos on this are going to look absolutely gorgeous. Let me know what you think, let me know what you're going to shoot. I look forward to seeing the results, and I'll see you again soon.